Hi, so in this session we're going to be making hot cross buns. So it's about 3 weeks or so away from Easter, so really nice seasonal thing to do. And compared with the basic bun dough, this is just showing you another step of bread making that's a slightly different technique. So today I'm going to start with something called a sponge. So you'll hear lots of different words when you're doing bread making of pre-ferment, and this is a form of pre-ferment. So here I have 45 grams of bread flour, and I've got 11 grams of sugar. I've got, how much? 11.5 grams of dried yeast. I would use fresh yeast, but I don't, it's really hard to get hold of at the moment. So I'm just going to put that in the bowl to one side as well. And then what I've got here, make sure it all goes in. And then what I've got is I've got 227 grams of milk, and what I'm going to do, add that and just stir it up. And what it'll make this very, very thin batter. So you say, well, what's the point of doing that? Why not just make the bread? So a bun dough is an enriched dough, and what we mean by an enriched dough means that it has things like egg and butter in it. When you add egg and butter to a bread dough, it can retard the yeast from rising, so it slows it down. It's like me and you, it's had a really nice big rich meal and it doesn't want to move. So what we do is by mixing in that yeast with the milk, so it's got the moisture, but then it's got some sugar and some flour, so lots of food and lots of and some nice sugar to really get it going. It's going to produce and multiply a lot more, so then when we add make our final dough, it can be more yeast, that it's going to have more strength, and it's going to really help the rise. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix this thoroughly. I'm just letting the yeast hydrate slightly, but as soon as that's done, I'm going to cover it, and then what I'm going to do is leave it 30 to 40 minutes, ideally about 24 degrees, and I'll let it rise. It should triple to quadruple in size. So I've left my sponge for about 40 minutes, just a few minutes over. I looked at it after 30 and it wasn't quite puffed up enough. You can see it looks really bubbly. As soon as I take that cling film off, it has that really strong yeasty smell, that slightly alcoholic smell. Okay, so in the bowl here I have my sugar, my salt, my flour, and I've got my butter. And my butter I've allowed to soften. So what I'm going to do, if I was doing this by hand, I'd rub the butter through the flour first, then I'd add my sugar and salt, my egg, and then my pre-ferment, get a bit of gluten formation, then I'd add my final ingredients. With this, what I've done is obviously put the sugar and salt in now, but again, I'm just going to spend a minute just rubbing that butter through that flour. So why do we rub butter through the flour? Because what it's going to do is it's going to coat the flour, and when you coat flour with butter, what it does, it stops the gluten formation from being too strong. So when we make, say, for an example, pastry, and we rub the butter in first into the flour, very quickly at the end we add the moisture and bring it together. That's to stop gluten formation, so it's nice and crumbly. With this, not such high quantities of butter, but actually adding that little bit of butter and rubbing it around the flour means that even though we want some gluten formation and we want those air bubbles to get trapped and that bread to grow, we don't. This isn't a baguette. This isn't a ciabatta where we want a tough, chewy bread. We still want this to be a soft dough. Obviously, we've got things to enrich it, like we've got egg and butter, which will also help it stay soft. But what we don't want is we don't want really high gluten formation. I'm just going to add my mixed spice to go through as well. That won't affect the gluten formation or anything like that. So now what I'm going to do is just mix that together until it starts to come away from the bowl slightly. So we've got some gluten formation, but it's not really strong. Okay. So dough has come away from the edge of the bowl, started to stick like a lump in the middle, but it's not looking super smooth. Okay. It's a little bit sticky, but it's not very sticky, so I've got some gluten formation, and that's what I want. I don't want it to be really strong, okay? I don't want that, as I'll keep repeating it, I don't want that tough bread. Okay, so now I'm going to just add my currants and my candied peel, and I'm just going to bring those together, make sure they're well mixed in. So I'll bring those together, I'll cover it, and then I need to, BFT, bulk fermentation time, is going to be about an hour. But of course I want to make sure it's doubled in size. Remember, it is all about atmospherics, it's not the exact time, it can differentiate depending on how warm your environment is. Obviously I'm using a prover, so about an hour should be right. But I'll check after 50 minutes, and then maybe have a look. Maybe leave it an extra 15 after that, or an extra 10. We'll see how it goes. So I'm about halfway through my bulk fermentation time through proving my hot cross buns. What I'd really like to do is just get a couple of other bits and pieces prepared. So what I want to do is get my tin prepared. So I've got a gastro here with a piece of grease proof, and all I'm going to do cut those four corners. How I prepare for anything like this when I want to line the gastro. And then what I'm going to do as well, just not so much overlap, cut those four corners. So if I wanted to, I could spray oil the inside of the tin, and that would just make it sit better, but I don't really need to. So just by cutting off those corners, it just helps it sit in the tin better. So now that is ready. So what I'm going to do now is quickly look at making my filling. So here I've got my butter and sugar for my hot cross bun batter. So I've got 57 sugar and I've got 57 butter, and I'm just gonna I've just put those on the heat to let them melt before I add everything else. So I've just heated up that butter and sugar. I'm just letting that sugar dissolve in the butter. So I've allowed my butter and sugar to cool slightly. What I'm going to do now, whisking and mixing that egg and milk and the vanilla and the lemon zest. Sieving this flour. Just gently bring it together. So there I've got my hot cross bun batter. So all I'm going to do is allow this to cool to room temperature. Do not put it in the fridge. Okay, once you put this in the fridge, butter in there, it will start to set. It'll make it really hard to pipe. You want it to be able to hold its shape, so just cool to room temperature, but without letting it go really hard. Otherwise you'll be there, and you want it to be natural flow. Okay, so what will happen is you'll cut a hole, and then you'll have to cut a bigger hole because it's starting to break through the piping bag. So now what I'm going to do, clean down, and I'm going to go on to scaling my buns. So I've had my dough fermenting for about an hour. It's doubled in size, and now I'm going to get round to doing the scaling. So this should make about 14. I've got my tray ready, and now I'm just going to get on with scaling and shaping. So I've got some cling film ready on the bench. Always good to have that, just to cover your dough. You don't want it to dry out. We want it to be, the dough to be tacky. We don't want it to dry out. Don't necessarily need lots on the bench. Just going to help you go along. It's quite good to have a little bit of a dry surface on the bench, because you want the dough to be tacky. You don't. It just helps with the shaping. So I'm going to scale these out to 75 grams. So 3, 6, 9, 10, 14 and a tiny bit. So just cover them up while you're not using them. And now what we want to do, the usual, where we're cupping our hand, we're rolling it around, we're feeling it going around inside the hand, and we're just pressuring it down a little bit. Get that nice round. Remember to, when we're doing this as well, remember to leave some room for growth. It's a shame that the mix doesn't make 15. That was sitting there perfect. I've got a little one there. So now I'm going to cover them over very loosely. A little bit of spray oil on there, just so that the cling film doesn't stick to it. Cling film, but then put them into a prover with lots of steam, and that's going to now prove for another hour. So I'm at that final stage. I've allowed the buns to prove. They've had about an hour and 10 minutes, so I just gave them that little bit longer. And now what I want to do is just put the crisscross over the top, so it's nice and soft. It's just come down to room temperature, so it'll hold its shape. Without being too cold and too hot. So I'm just going to give it about 5mm hole. Don't want too much, you don't want to run out. And what I'm going to do is just draw a line across. bit better grip this time because it is still stiff to get out. Just let it drop into that gap in between. Again over, drop it in between that gap. So I'll do that little mini one. They'll be completely overcooked for its size compared with the others. And now they're ready to go in the oven. So you see I've got loads of mix left, but if I did too big a line, just you'd run out. So these are now going to go in the oven. Full steam, so I've got full 100% steam, 180 for 12 minutes.